struck 10. It is officially time to start. So good morning, everybody. I'm Andrew. If I've never talked to you before, I'm one of the educators here at ByWater. Somebody else is online, but they're also just marked as education team. It's either Kelly or Donna. Hi, Donna.
Hey, Andrew.
Donna's going to be helping out, just kind of shepherding questions as they come in. So this morning we're talking about technical services in 1805. Bunch of acquisitions, cataloging, and whatnot. Before we dive into that, let me share my screen. And just a couple quick notes. We are about halfway through our upgrade webinars. The ones that are still coming, you can see. I'm just grabbing a URL and pasting it here. On our website, let me put this in chat as well. So feel free to sign up for any of those that haven't happened yet. You can also see, also on our website at this URL, all of our upgrade notes and also recordings of all of the webinars we've already done. So if you've missed what has come before and you aren't going to be able to make it to the second round of those, do please have a look here. You'll see both our notes and recordings of those webinars. They'll also just be on our YouTube channel. So they're easy to find. If you need to catch up on one you missed or point somebody else at one of them, they are there. Also, just feel free to open tickets with questions if anything specifically comes up. But should be a nice smooth upgrade. When the upgrade happens, you'll get a note on your system a couple weeks before, a big red news note from Larry, letting you know when you'll be upgraded. That'll be on a Sunday evening. And then on Monday morning, you just need to clear your cache and you'll be ready to go. Todd is asking if I can put those links in chat, and I thought I just did. Did I not share them to everybody? Let me see here.
You did post them in chat, so I'm not quite sure. Oh, you posted them to all panelists. I'll go ahead and update them. Keep going.
Helpful. Sorry, I linked them to Donna and not anybody else, which was not the way to do that. Okay. Yeah, so as I go along today, do please, as Todd has nicely demonstrated, feel free to put questions in chat or in the Q&A tool. As I've nicely demonstrated, it is a little easy in chat to accidentally send that to just the panelists, not to everybody. So the QA tool is probably a little bit better just to make sure everybody sees what you're putting in chat. All right, so without further ado, let's look at tech services. I'm gonna close these windows. And I'm gonna start today in acquisitions. And my first few things are all gonna have to do with changes to how we can put things in baskets. So I'm gonna find a basket under Amazon. I'm going to use this one from Kelly. So our first new feature has to do with what you get when you add to basket from a new empty record. So this is when you're creating a bib record in order to put it in a basket. Starting in 1805, we have the option to configure specifically what we want to appear here in the catalog details box. So this is saying specifically what parts of the bib record you want to be required when creating a new bib in order to order something. Previously, there was a just set list of fields here that you had no control over. You can now customize both what is shown and what is required. And you do that through the acquisitions framework. So if you don't have an acquisitions framework set up in your system, you'll need one to use this feature. It's also just a handy thing for a variety of other reasons. Just to take a quick peek over at those, I'm going to open up admin. and go to Frameworks. So we have an acquisitions framework here, and you can see that if I go to Mark Structure, the fields I have defined in that acquisition framework are the fields that show up when I create a new record in a basket in acquisitions. If you don't have an acquisitions framework, there is one that you can download and install on the Koha wiki. Which I probably have a link to somewhere, but let's Google it. So we've got a sample acquisitions framework here. You can just download it from the wiki and import it into your system. Absolutely, let us know if you want any help with that. But yeah, this new feature does require you to have that acquisitions framework set up. I will put that in the chat as well.
And just as a side note, Andrew, we've discovered that there seems to be some sort of weirdness. I don't want to call it a bug, but this framework was created in 1805, and it will not let you import it into 1711. Okay. So we're not quite sure what's happening. But for those of you that want to be early adopters for that, don't do it because it won't work.
Yeah, wait until you get to 1805 to put it in, or create an acquisitions framework by copying your default framework. But that's a lot more work. So yeah, maybe hold off until you get upgraded. Thanks, Donna. And the next thing I want to look at is also concerning adding things to a basket. But in this case, it's, and I'm going to back up so I can show you while I talk. If I say add to basket from an existing record, we have a little change to how searching works here. And I'm going to do a search to show you. Previously, when you did a search, the results you got only showed you specifically the title, not any subtitles, which for something like Dork Diaries, which is a series, made this screen a little bit unhelpful. It would just be a list of Dork Diaries, Dork Diaries, Dork Diaries, which first off required you to say that 3 times fast, which is not fun, but also just was really hard to figure out which books you were looking at. So now we are showing subtitles in there. So this is a kind of complicated change to how Koha looks at keywords and mark mapping that has broader ramifications ultimately. But for right now, this is the place where you're going to see this. This is an upgrade that was sponsored by one of our partners, Round Rock Public Library in Texas. So thanks to them. And yeah, this should make this a lot more usable. You'll also see this full title with the subtitle in the OPAC if you're looking up something that has a long subtitle, and a few other places. I also just expect this feature to kind of get expanded and used in other ways in the future. But for now, this is the big takeaway of it. I'm going to jump back to my basket again and show you another little acquisitions thing. Will the subtitle show up when you're receiving items? That's a good question. Should. Let me loop back to that because I've got titles in this basket that'll work well to test that. But before I can receive anything in this basket, I have to deal with what I set up to show you something else. So we'll loop back to that one. So my next change here has to do with uncertain prices. I don't think a lot of people use uncertain prices. I don't run into it often, but it's it can be a little bit tricky because it previously made it a little hard to see what was going on. So in any specific item you're adding to a basket, you can mark it as uncertain price, which tells Koha that you're not sure what the price will be. And that stops you from closing the basket. As long as you have anything in your cart with an uncertain price, your basket cannot be closed. Now, previously, that just grayed out the close the basket button and didn't tell you why. And you can see in this basket, I do have close this basket is grayed out. But now, if I mouse over it, you get a little button that pops up that says cannot close baskets that have items with uncertain prices in them, which is a step in the right direction. It's still, it's something you need to deal with, but it at least tells you now what it is that you need to deal with. And let's see. So if I go down to my first example here, and I modify that book, you can see that one of the things I get in the accounting details section is this little checkbox, uncertain price. Once I uncheck that and save it, now I can close my basket. You also notice there was, before I unchecked that, there was another button that showed up that said uncertain prices that I could click to see which things have uncertain prices. I just remembered that I had done it to the first book in the list. All right, so now I can close this basket. And that basket I just closed did contain some copies of a couple of Dark Diaries books. So let's see if I say receive shipment. And let's just make a new invoice with a gobbledygook name. And we'll search in the list of expected stuff for Dark Diaries. It is not showing the subtitle there. So that would absolutely be a thing that we, now that Koha knows how to look at that whole title with subtitle, this would be a place where that could get pushed to. But so far, it is not showing that right here. Obviously, these two links go off to the full record where we could see that. But yeah, that would be a helpful thing. Now, speaking of searching within acquisitions, my next thing I want to look at is a small change to how we search by ISBN here. So I'm going to go to, again, in acquisitions, an order search, and then an advanced search. So if I'm searching within acquisitions to figure out when something was ordered, who it was ordered from, I can search by ISBN. Let me grab an example here. And there we go, it found my book. However, previously, if I searched by the 10-digit ISBN, when that record only contained the 13-digit ISBN, it wouldn't find that for me. There is a system preference that allows that sort of alternate ISBN search. It didn't previously extend to acquisition searches here, but it now does. So I've got the 10-digit ISBN for that same book. Stick that in. And that finds the book for me, even though we can see right here that record doesn't actually contain the 10-digit ISBN. Koha takes the 10-digit, converts it into 13, and looks for that as well. And the system preference for that is called Search with ISBN Variations. Now, this is probably already turned on your system because, as I said, this previously applied to other parts of Koha. It'll now just work in acquisitions as well. It does not work if you have the system preference use query parser turned on. I don't believe that's a thing that is generally turned on, that we turn on for people. It's off by default, so it is probably not on your system. Now, the next thing I want is not actually in acquisitions, it's just acquisitions adjacent. So let me back up a little bit. Oop, not in that tab. In this tab. I'm going to actually go to this record. We have a small change to how acquisitions details show up in the catalog. So this is on the staff side rather than the public side. And we have added another column here for invoice. So previously, if you looked at acquisitions details, you could see vendor, basket, order number, and dates. And those could get you to that invoice through a series of clicks and searches. But now we have a direct link straight back to the invoice to see not only who did this come from, but when was it received and where, what was it received with. Good, Sandra's excited. Yeah, it's just a nice, handy, easier way to get somewhere, which is always nice to see. Now, my last thing in acquisitions is actually just a note about acquisitions frameworks. Going forward, Koha is going to, on every new install, contain a default acquisitions framework. That doesn't apply a ton to all of you because you're already on Koha. But I suppose if you go to some new library and you talk them into Koha, their new install will have an acquisitions framework right out of the gate, which will be nice because it's a handy thing. All right, next I'm going to jump over to administration. And this is going to get us a little deep into the inner workings of Koha, probably to an area not many of you have fiddled with. But under Koha to mark mapping, we have a new feature here that allows any mark field, now let me say that differently, multiple mark fields to be tied to any one Koha database field. The big immediate implication of this is just more flexibility. Specifically, the example we've been looking at is publication date. So if I look at, Control F here, copyright date. So the AACR2 standard for copyright date was to put that in the 260C. So we've all got a pile of records that have copyright date in the 260C, and that's where Koha has been looking for it to pull that into the database and make it easy for reporting and things. But RDA wants to put that copyright date in 264C, which was an issue for Koha because Koha only previously knew how to look one place for that copyright date. Now we can set up your Koha to mark mapping to say, look in both of these fields and give me what you find from either one of them. So we can set you up so that your older records still continue to pull that date from the 260C without issue, and any new records that have that in the 264, you can do both. And that in turn makes it easier to run a report on copyright date when you have records that keep that in two different places. That is maybe not the simplest setup. It's quick, but it's again in an area that maybe a lot of you haven't fiddled with much. Do please, if that's something you want to pursue, setting that up, let us know. We're happy to work that out with you. And then, speaking of mark fields, I'm going to jump back to administration and go to frameworks again. So we already had the ability in frameworks to define default values for any given field. To say, for every record I create in my acquisitions framework, automatically set items to not for loan status on order. Or put in whenever I make a a record in the CD framework, put in a little material specified note about checking for the proper number of disks. We've been able to do that for a long, long time. But 1805 adds a new ability to, within a framework, let me click mark structure here, define default mark indicators for any mark field. Now, last time I talked about this in the webinar, I got everybody all riled up because I admitted that I have no understanding of mark indicators at all. I'm so not a cataloger. I know that they are a thing and that they are useful, and I don't understand the uses of them even a tiny bit. But for those of you who are catalogers and do understand what mark indicators are for, you can, as I said, now define default indicators for any field in a specific framework. Now my next change is to, whoops, that's not what I want, is to the interface when adding or editing items in Koha. So I'm going to grab my nice Reese Witherspoon book that I've been using for my example. Oh, which this is a training site issue. We do end up with things like 3 bibs for the same book for no reason. Let's grab the one that actually has items. And if I click to edit this copy, this is a small change, but previously these labels here were all left justified, so they ran along this side, and then we had our boxes over here. And for the fields with shorter names, like say not for loan or lost status, we had some folks who felt that the distance from the label over here to the field over here made it a little hard to follow which was which. So these are all now right justified to make it real easy to tell which label goes to which field. My next cataloging change is something that I'm really excited about. That might just be from my perspective as a support person, but I'm gonna grab this record number, and let's see, if I go to Tools and Log Viewer, so you probably all know that Koha does have a catalog log that saves or records every change to a bib or item record. And for a long time, we've been telling people to turn that off by default because Koha, whenever something was checked in or checked out, technically that's a change to the item record and or the bib record, and that got saved to the cataloging log, which meant the cataloging log was always full of circ information that made it really hard to see actual cataloging changes. And in 1805, I'm very excited to announce that has been fixed. All that circulation stuff no longer gets saved into the cataloging log. So that log is no longer really huge, is no longer a giant resource drain. So you can actually turn that on and start recording what gets changed in your records and by whom and when. So let's see, if I take my bib number and I put it in here, let's see what we've got. I didn't actually verify that this is turned on this site. There we go. Then the cataloging log, you can see I've been in here making some changes to this record. Now, if you are a really big library with lots and lots of records that get changed a whole lot, this could still be, it will still be a big log, possibly to the point that it does become a system drain. But Definitely for smaller or medium-sized libraries, this is absolutely something you could turn on and use. Even for bigger libraries, you could turn it on and just see how it works for you. It's a log, so it's not the easiest thing in the world to read, but it is showing me changes here. Where does one turn it on? Asked Carol. That gets turned on in the system preferences, and it's real easy. I'm going to go to Admin, System Preferences, and Logs. Sandra, by default, all your logs get cleared out after a year. That may be different on your site depending on what you've asked us to set up for you, but that's the general default, is to clear logs after a year. So in System Preferences, there's a tab for logs, and once we're here, this tells us what we are and are not logging, and cataloging log is right here. Actually, we've still got a little note here that needs to get cleared out of the text of the System Preferences. So like I said, that's a very exciting thing to me, and I'm sure there are catalogers out there who will be happy to have some better record there. All right, for my next cataloging change, I'm going to actually go into the cataloging module. And I'm going to make a new record from Z3950. We will search here. Two questions that popped up. Baha, I'm sorry if I'm saying your name wrong, asks how to create patron card. You know, that's a bit involved and outside of the scope of this webinar. Why don't we follow up with you on that, or if you could open a ticket with us, we'd be happy to talk that through with you. But that's kind of a, like I said, outside of what we're covering here, and would take a little bit of time. And Gabriella asks, that in the next release, the 245 F and G would display in the staff catalog in OPAC. That I'm not sure of. Donna, can you poke around a little bit and see if you can find an answer for that?
Absolutely, I sure will.
Thank you. Okay, so I was doing a Z3950 search, and the change here is just kind of how these things are displayed. We used to have 3 separate columns over here for mark preview, ISBN card preview, and import. Those now all live in the actions button, which wants my window to be a little bit bigger. Yeah, that was helpful. So they live in the actions button. They work the same. If we hit mark preview, we get the mark there. Card import gives us the ISBN information. It also, whenever we click any of those, it highlights the line we're looking at much more obviously. Used to give it just sort of a different shade of gray. Now it's this very clear orange. So functionality is the same, display is a little bit improved there.
Okay, I found the question to Gabriella's, or the answer to Gabriella's question. Yes, that was a bug, and that will be in release 18.05.03. And since we're bringing everyone up on 18.05.05, it'll definitely be showing. And those are the subfields F and G will be displaying in the OPAC and staff side. And I will put the bug in the chat if anyone's really interested about that.
Cool, thanks, Donna. This is, again, me, not a cataloger. I'm trying to remember what the 245 F and G are.
Yeah, that was my first step to look up what those were.
All right, from here, I've got a bunch of changes to the advanced editor. And I want to look at those from an existing record. So let's get Reese Witherspoon back here. I don't know how she became the go-to example, but here we are. Okay, so if I edit this record, in the advanced editor, basically we've got a slew of new shortcuts, first off, and those are all visible in this keyboard shortcuts button. The first two are we've got a new shortcut for copyright symbol and another one for, what is the little P? Copyright symbol for sound recordings. I'm not familiar with the little P in a circle. But these are both Alt and then C or P. If you're on a Mac like I am, that's Option rather than Alt. But if we put our cursor someplace and say Alt C, we get our little copyright, Alt P. So making that easier to put into a record. Probably not like that. Probably in a more organized fashion, and not in the 001 of all places. But yeah, we've got keyboard shortcuts for those. The other new keyboard shortcut we have is down here, link field to authorities, Control-Shift-L. So we can now, from the advanced editor, link any authority-controlled field to an authority record. We used to only be able to do that either through the script that automatically matches things up on the cron job or over in the regular editor. But now, if I take my cursor and I put it in any authority-controlled field, so let's go to the 100 and hit Control-Shift-L. It pops up a little search box to help me find the authority record I want and link that field up. If I'm in a non-authority control field, here's the 042. That just doesn't do anything, which is good. You don't want to weirdly connect up authorities on non-authority fields. My next advanced editor thing, it is now the case that if I'm in here and I have made changes and I try to click away, I get a nice little note that says changes may not be saved. Now, in this case, I don't want to save those changes because they're just a bunch of copyright icons in the 001. So let's say cancel. But yeah, it used to let you just wander away and not save your changes. So a little confirmation is always good. And then my last note about the advanced editor is just that over in System Preferences, oh, I clicked the wrong thing. Just a change to where the switch for the advanced editor lives. Oh, one, I'm going to forget what it's called. There we go, Enable Advanced Cataloging Editor. This used to live for a long time in the Labs tab, which actually is empty now, so it's not showing up. So it was in this special tab called Labs with a note that said this is an experimental feature, and it was there for a long time, even after everybody was really, really certain that the advanced editor was working just fine and it didn't need to be experimental anymore. So now it's just over in Cataloging Preferences. And it doesn't say anything about it being experimental or new. So it's finally graduated. It's a real system preference now. My next thing also has to do with authority records, but it's more a matter of display. I'm going to back up again, back to Reese Witherspoon. And in the staff client, we now have For all these subject headings that are tied up to authorities, we have a little magnifying glass that will take us, it's probably pretty hard to see, but if you look at the link at the bottom of my screen, it's pointing to that authority. The magnifying glass will take us straight to that authority record. Now, this feature already existed over on the OPAC. It just hadn't made its way to the staff client yet. So now it's here. Your staff can use the same thing that they used to be able to use on the OPAC, which really makes more sense to me. Authorities seem like something that librarians and library staff are going to look at. Maybe not so much just your general patron base. So I'm going to copy a link here to show you my next thing, because I need a specific record. So this next change is to the 555U field, which is table of contents, I think, item notes anyway. So we now have the ability, if we've got in the 555U a web address, that will now show in the title information in the description as a clickable live link. It used to just give you the text. Now it will automatically make that a link. This joins the 505U and the 520U, which both already made live links. Now we get one in the 555U as well. So in the staff client, that shows up in the descriptions tab. Oop, that's the wrong button. And if I click over to the OPAC, it shows up in the title notes tab as a live link. There's no change you need to make there. If you've got titles that already have a link in the 555U, when you go to 1805, it'll work. It'll be a clickable link rather than just the text of the address. Okay, my next several things are all to do with serials. So I'm going to jump from here to serials. And my first is the new ability to batch renew subscriptions. So if I go to check expiration, I can do a search for subscriptions that are expiring before a certain date. I think ours are, honestly, because we've done this webinar once before, everything got renewed way out in advance. So let me jump to October 2020 and see if we have any subscriptions expiring. Nope, not quite yet. A little further. There we go. So previously we had to renew subscriptions one at a time. We can now find them here. Let's not do all of them, maybe. Let's just do a couple. And right from here, we can say renew selected subscriptions. It'll grab both of these and push the expiration date of the subscription forward. The amount of time that it goes forward is actually set up in the subscription. When you made that subscription first thing back in the, long ago, you told it how long that subscription period was, whether a number of issues or a number of months. So it'll just jump that forward that much time again. So I'm going to say renew. And those two subscriptions have been renewed. And Baha has a question here. Can a specific tags be customized in normal view? OPAC staff. Not sure what you mean.
Andrew, I think he's probably referring to the frameworks where you can edit what the OPAC display is versus the librarian display. Is that what you're thinking of, Baha? Okay, if you want, Andrew, go ahead and continue, and I'll chat with Baha and see what we can do about getting that taken care of.
Sounds good. Thank you. All right, I'm going to jump back to serials. So our next change to serials has to do with receiving multiple issues at a time. So to look at that, I'm going to grab one of these subscriptions. Let's just say people. So when you're looking at a subscription in Koha here, if you click on serial collection, this will show you all your issues in that subscription. And in this case, I've got 2 that I'm still waiting on, 2 that are marked as expected. I can now, if I select the issues I want and hit edit, that brings me both of these here. I can mark both of these as arrived. In this case, it is prompting me to create an item record because that's how my subscription is set up. Lost my mouse. So I just marked those to arrive. I didn't fill out any of the item information because I'm a lazy bad cataloger. But yeah, it has marked both of those as arrived. It's changed the date received. Can you add or hide a particular tag in the normal display? If you mean this content here, Baha, it's easy to hide those things. It's difficult to add those things. That's controlled by the XSLT style sheet, which takes some coding to add anything. But anything you want to hide can be easily hidden with jQuery. So next thing also in subscriptions is batch editing of subscriptions. And to look at that, I'm going to do, let's just do a search for all my subscriptions. So we have a new ability from here. When we've done a search that brings us multiple subscriptions, we can click as many of them as we want. And you see we get a new little edit selected serials button. So this is going to do a batch edit to all those subscriptions and allow me to change a variety of things. It's not going to let me set a new numbering pattern for all of them, but some of this basic information like vendor, if say multiple subscriptions jumped from EBSCO to Cox, you could change those all on the go, change which library branch they belong to, stuff like that. I guess this is library branch, this is shelving location. So quick, easy change to a bunch of serials subscriptions all at a go. And then our last thing in here is serials related. It doesn't do a lot to what you do over here in the staff client, but if you are using routing lists with your serials, so that's a feature you can turn on that allows patrons to subscribe for notifications every time you get a new issue of a given serial title. patrons are now able to see their routing lists over on the OPAC. Let me, real quick, jump over to the OPAC and log in and show you that. Oh, this is going to be bad. That was some bad web address editing there. So, and my password is wrong. So in my patron record in the OPAC, there's a new tab over here on the left for your routing lists. And that shows me the serials titles, the subscriptions for which I am receiving notifications of new issues. I can't change anything here. I still need to talk to a librarian to add new titles to this or remove titles, but at least lets me see here which titles I'm getting notifications about. And that brings us to the end of our tech services webinar. Can notifications be set up for new books too? No, Koha does not know how to do that. It only knows how to do new issues of a subscription. So thank you all for coming. This recording will go up on our upgrades website, the link I gave you at the beginning, as well as questions and answers. You'll also see there questions and answers from the previous session of this webinar, so you can see what other folks asked about. I'm happy to hang out here a little bit, and if anyone else has any other questions. Otherwise, thank you all for coming. So I'm just going to stare at the chat box for a little bit here. Just give you all a chance to type things. I don't see any questions coming in. It seems like maybe you do not have questions. Okay. Well, then I'm going to call it. Thank you all.